we're a long way from her potentially going to jail. I'm not sure how you get to implicate Blake Lively into going to jail on the basis of those facts just yet. But to the extent that those personal communications were illegally obtained, and I think that they know that they were, because there's no other reason to file this sham lawsuit. What they're essentially doing is trying to take illegally obtained stuff and give it color of law.
How does a name like Blake Lively, an actress long known for her polished image and Hollywood success, become entangled in something as complex and questionable as judicial scrutiny? What began as a glamorous career move has morphed into a high-stakes courtroom drama filled with secrecy, subpoenas, and whispers of misconduct. Judge Lyman himself has already said there's more than enough to investigate, and the deeper you look, the more tangled the story becomes. This isn't just about one celebrity's lawsuit. It's about how far a powerful team might go to protect their star's reputation, and whether the system itself can withstand that kind of pressure. But before we get to the heart of the controversy, let's start with the mystery that lit the fuse. A shell company few had ever heard of, suddenly holding the power to shake Hollywood. Enter Vonson Incorporated, on paper just another faceless corporate entity. But in this case, it's no ordinary LLC. Vonson has become a lightning rod, the center of a storm that threatens to unravel everything Blake Lively's legal team has built. Shell corporations aren't unusual in high-stakes litigation. They're often used to protect identities or shield strategies, but their very existence carries baggage. They look secretive, defensive, almost manipulative. So when Judge Lyman realized that Lively's team had leaned on Vonson Incorporated to issue subpoenas, alarm bells went off. He demanded answers. Why was it created? Who was really behind it? And most importantly, was it being used to sidestep transparency? The judge didn't mince words. The integrity of the legal process must come before convenience or success. A pointed reminder that bending the rules isn't the same as winning. And here's the problem: if misconduct is proven, everything tied to Vonson, including critical evidence, could be thrown out. Overnight, Lively's carefully constructed defense would collapse like a house of cards. But the shell company is just the beginning. What really turned this into a scandal were the subpoenas and the explosive communications they unearthed. At first glance, subpoenas are nothing new. They're legal tools, standard practice in lawsuits. But the way Lively's team used them is now under intense scrutiny. Through Vonson, her lawyers targeted private communications, emails, text messages, even personal cloud accounts. Some of it looked routine, but dig deeper, and the methods start to look questionable. Reports surfaced that individuals were cornered, pressured, even escorted out of buildings as their devices were seized. Here's the key issue. Business communications? Fair game. But personal accounts? That's a very different story. By crossing into that territory, Lively's team may have opened the door to accusations of invasion of privacy, unethical tactics, even abuse of process. The stakes are enormous. If those communications were improperly obtained, Judge Lyman could rule them inadmissible, and that means the very evidence Blake's team fought so hard to secure might vanish from the record. But what exactly did those messages say, and were they worth the risk? The crown jewels of this subpoena battle are the text messages, private exchanges that now sit at the heart of the case. Among them is a chilling line: "We can bury anybody, we can bury anyone." To Lively's critics, these words looked like proof of a retaliation campaign, a coordinated effort to silence voices critical of her. But the problem is bigger than the content. It's the legitimacy of how these texts were obtained. If ruled valid, they could reshape the narrative entirely, painting Blake's opponents as conspirators and reinforcing her defense. But if Judge Lyman decides they were gathered illegally, the entire case could implode. And that's not all. The optics are devastating. For someone like Blake Lively, whose public image has always been built on approachability, elegance, and trustworthiness, just the suggestion of rule bending is enough to raise doubts. Even if she wins legally, the court of public opinion may already have shifted, because once you're accused of manipulating the system, that stain doesn't wash off easily. But Judge Lyman isn't just focused on the evidence. He's also keeping an eye on the bigger picture. To some observers, Judge Lyman looks protective of Lively. After all, he has granted her team certain accommodations, from deposition scheduling to protective orders. But others argue his rulings show balance, that he's willing to call out questionable tactics when necessary. For example, when he addressed the Vonson subpoena issue, his ruling hit hard against Lively's team, suggesting skepticism toward their methods. At the same time, he's dismissed some of Baldoni's more aggressive filings, especially those tied to media leaks and salacious PR maneuvers. In truth, Lyman's approach seems less about favoritism and more about control. He wants to keep the case from spiraling into chaos, reminding both sides that the courtroom, not the press, is where these battles belong. Still, his scrutiny has real consequences. By questioning Lively's shell corporation and subpoenas, he's cast a shadow over her entire defense strategy, and that shadow may follow her far beyond the courthouse. In Hollywood, reputation is currency. Careers rise and fall not just on talent but on perception. And for Blake Lively, who has spent years cultivating an image of poise and relatability, this controversy cuts deep. The suggestion that her team manipulated the legal system, even if unproven, chips away at that image. Instead of the polished star, she risks being seen as someone willing to bend rules and exploit loopholes. And here's the kicker: scandals stick. Even if a jury clears her name, the public may never forget the headlines. Shell corporations, abuse of process, questionable subpoenas. These phrases linger, recycled endlessly across social media and entertainment blogs. It's the double-edged sword of celebrity trials. Winning in court isn't the same as winning over the public. And sometimes the fight for reputation is the hardest battle of all. But Blake's legal storm isn't confined to judges and lawyers. It's spilling into new arenas like TikTok. When TikTok creators start becoming part of Hollywood lawsuits, you know the drama has reached another level. And that's exactly what happened with Nadia G. Reed's.
Here's where it sort of started. You had a couple TikToks, innocent TikToks, very neneutral. In my perspective, I watched them all again, just calling out, well, there's some weird drama, and you literally call, he's an unproblematic king, she's an unproblematic queen. You were team everybody. Maybe a little shade at Colleen Hoover because I guess you didn't love parts of the book, but all very neutral and sort of you're very well spoken the way you did it. And then as you sort of got into it further, you called out the PR marketing, which a lot of people did. The fact that Justin was in the background and now it's all fun and fluffy, as you're saying here, and it's not raising awareness to the heart of the film. A very valid thing that a lot of people were noticing. And you were one of the earliest TikToks that I could see too that was sort of calling this out. Now you netted almost 4 million views off this TikTok, correct?
Yeah, a little over that, I think.
A book-focused creator who built a following by reviewing novels and adaptations. Nadia's commentary on It Ends With Us went viral, racking up millions of views. She called out what she saw as tone-deaf marketing, accusing the campaign of glossing over domestic abuse themes and romanticizing toxic relationships. Her words struck a chord, sparking a wave of online criticism. Then came the messages. Private DMs urging her to pull back, warning that allegations against Justin Baldoni were about to surface, and suggesting that Blake was the real victim. To Nadia, they felt too deliberate to be random trolls. Instead, they seemed like part of a coordinated push to silence dissent. She never accused Blake's team directly, but the timing, the wording, the pressure, it all raised questions. Was Hollywood's PR machine reaching down to silence independent voices on TikTok? For Nadia, the experience was unsettling. She insisted her videos were organic, her opinions her own, yet she felt targeted, as if her small but influential platform was being treated as a genuine threat. And if her suspicions are true, it would mean Lively's team wasn't just fighting in court. They were fighting to control the narrative everywhere, even at the grassroots level of social media. But whether or not those messages came from her camp, they highlighted an uncomfortable truth. In Hollywood, controlling perception can sometimes matter more than controlling evidence. Zoom out, and this case isn't just about Blake Lively. It's a window into Hollywood's legal and PR playbook. Think about it: shell corporations created to mask strategies, subpoenas stretching the limits of ethics, social media creators pressured into silence, evidence that could either exonerate a star or expose them completely. It's a reminder of how closely celebrity reputation is tied to legal maneuvering. Lawyers don't just argue cases, they help shape public image. PR teams don't just run campaigns, they protect narratives at all costs. And the question Judge Lyman is really asking isn't just was the evidence properly obtained, it's how far can power go before it becomes abuse. Because if courts allow this kind of secrecy and manipulation unchecked, it sets a precedent. It tells future celebrities and corporations, go ahead, bend the rules, winning is all that matters. But if the court cracks down, it could reshape the landscape entirely. Suddenly, transparency and accountability would become not just ideals, but legal necessities. And that's what makes this case so much bigger than one star's reputation. So where does it all stand? Right now, the texts remain at the center. They could be dynamite in court, proving smear campaigns and retaliation. Or they could be tossed out, their very existence tainted by the methods used to obtain them. For Blake, the gamble is immense. If the evidence holds, she could turn the tables, painting her critics as aggressors. But if it fails, she risks not just losing the case, but losing the trust of the public. And beyond her own career, this trial could mark a turning point. Judge Lyman's rulings may set stricter standards for evidence, transparency, and accountability in high-profile cases. In other words, The outcome here won't just decide Blake Lively's future. It could rewrite the rulebook for how Hollywood power players operate in courtrooms for years to come. So the question lingers, was this a smart strategy or a dangerous step over the line? Because in Hollywood, when power, perception, and the law collide, the truth is never simple. And in Blake Lively's case, it may be even messier than anyone expected. And that's where the story stands for now. Each new filing, each leaked text, each TikTok post adds another twist to a case that's already one of the most unpredictable Hollywood has ever seen. What do you think? Was this clever strategy, or has Blake Lively's team gone too far? Drop your thoughts below and stay tuned. Because if history is any guide, the most shocking revelations are still to come.